And I've heard rumors. I mean, I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe you could clarify it. Do males at some point become females, or they strictly stay males?
That I've never heard of for marlin. I don't. They're not like. No, but that does happen, Leo.
I've heard that.
That's actually a great question, because in a bunch of fish that does happen.
And how did it start out? Like, what was the origin story?
Too much alcohol.
Really? Okay.
Says if God wanted us to have fiberglass boats, he would have given us fiberglass trees.
It's for fishermen. It's not for taking the wife and the wife's friends.
I think that it's a really, really pretty bit.
And then there was a blur that went by and ended up in the cockpit, as far as if I can remember correctly.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the State of Sport Fishing Podcast. I'm Nick Carullo, captain of Showtime. And tonight I'm joined with Leo Chapman, the founder of Billfish Gear. Before I welcome our guest, I would like to say that we don't run ads. And if this podcast brings you any value in any way, please refer it to a friend. With that said, I would like to welcome our guest, Peter Chaibongsai, the director of the Billfish Foundation. Thanks for joining us, Peter. We're happy to have you on tonight.
No, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on with you guys, listen to you guys. And obviously, Billfish Gear is, as I was telling Leo before, is worn by a number of our members, which I think, Leo, you were just on one of their boats recently.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've known you guys for quite some time. And actually, as you were saying before, Leo, you kind of got your start meeting one of our staff members many years ago as well.
Yeah. I'll share that story here. I was 14. I traveled to Aruba to actually do my first competitive billfish tournament ever. That was back when circle hooks were like kind of a new thing and getting introduced. Everyone was fishing those laser sharp ones. What was that reference number again? Like something 211. I don't remember which one it was, but it was a black one. The black one. And the laser sharp. Eagle claw. Laser sharp.
It was Eagle claw. That's what it was for sure.
Eagle claw laser sharp. That's what it was. Yeah. So it's around that time period. And I was there. I was 14 and I went fishing. And, I saw the little booth with like the pelagic and the Billfish Foundation shirt. And I was like, it's so cool. And I bought a hat from Andrew. And, he went on to just absolutely crush it in the industry. So it was awesome. But yeah, cool. So Peter, how did you get involved with the Billfish Foundation?
Yeah. So I got started, I want to say about 15 years ago. I was finishing up grad school here at the University of Miami at the Rosenstiel School. I was studying marine policy and marine business and marine policy. And I knew I wanted to work for an international, well-known nonprofit, but just happened to be small because I'd worked in the municipality before and a state government before. And there was this really great opening at the Billfish Foundation. And I just kind of worked my way through the foundation. And here I am today.
Nice.
When was that? When you started?
So that was 2006, I think it was. I joined TBF. And I had always, I'll be honest, I fished here and there at home. We had a small little freshwater pond. I think we called it Surprise Lake or whatever like that. It's super tiny. We'd catch like catfish and like
where was that at?
In New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah. And we would, just find whatever we could. But that's, how you kind of get started. And I've always obviously loved the water, and that's why I've been studying it for so many years. And then I had this fantastic opportunity to join TBF. And outside of, I have to say this, marrying my wife is one of the best decisions I've ever made, just because, as you guys know, you guys live it. It's one of the best communities to be in. There's always, people are very candid, which is great because I can't stand bullshit, to be honest. I hope that's okay to say on this. And then
I feel the same way.
Yeah, there's no bullshit. There's no, beating around the bush. It's, people tell you how it is. And that's, coming from New Jersey, that's how I like it. I don't like, any of that kind of other stuff. But the more important fact is people are really genuine and super generous if they know you're legit. And I think this community, from the outside looking in, if you're not part of the community, always gets a bad rap, especially on the conservation side, when we're typically, I want to say, the leaders in it. You guys probably know it more than I do since you're fishing more than I am at this point. But, I see it from the policy standpoint and the advocacy standpoint to where we're a constant battle trying to let people know that, anglers are, we're proactive. We don't want to shoot ourselves literally in the foot. We enjoy the sport. We don't want to see it die. So,
yeah. And how long have you been director now for?
It's probably been close to, at least 8 years or so.
Wow.
That's kind of changed for some time, maybe 10 years. But for a while I was just doing science. For a while I was just doing policy. Then they merged that together. And that's what we're doing now. And just going to give a quick shout out too, because we're actually looking to hire pretty soon, probably in the new year. So anyone that's listening, if you have an interest in billfish and billfish conservation, and more specifically billfish policy and advocacy, just let me know. I'll give you guys all my contact information. It's a pretty awesome job, to be honest. I'm not going to lie to you. That's why I've been there for so long. And it's going to give you a lot of really amazing opportunities, not only to fish, but to network. And the networking, as you guys know, within this community, if you do it right, you're golden. So
awesome.
Awesome.
Let me ask you a question. When you joined 2006, was that around the time that people were switching slowly from circle hooks to J hooks, or was that like before or after?
No, that was just around the time where we had to hold circle hook workshops.
Wow.
And we had to try to convince, the anglers that were just picking it up, right? There's that old adage of you can't teach old dog new tricks. But once people were just learning it, it's essentially a new skill, right? At this point, everybody knows that. But, it's hard to change people's minds back then. But luckily, a lot of people were open to it. They knew it was coming, right? To where it was going to have to be done anyway. And we had kind of mentioned it earlier on. One of our board members at the time, Joan Vernon, her actual tournament was the first tournament to institute circle hooks as mandatory for her billfish tournament.
No way. The one I fished?
No, not that one. Actually, before that,
Okay.
Part of the presidential. But what was really interesting, and why I bring that up, is because her tournament brought it up first. It was the first tournament to ever institute circle hooks as mandatory for billfish. And then it took, I think, 2 to 3 years later, that's when it became mandatory for all billfish tournaments to use circle hooks. So whenever I talk about, conservation, I always bring up, we are typically very proactive. I don't like Big Brother hovering over me and telling me what to do. I would prefer one of my peers to suggest and say, hey, why don't we do this, and cut it off before someone else that doesn't know the community. Let us self-regulate, essentially, right? Let's self-regulate, and we have been known to do that fairly well, I like to think. And let's take care of our own, rather than having someone from wherever, whether it's Washington or whatever internationally, tell us what to do, when we know what we're seeing on the water, as well as we know how to reach out to the right people, and for them to understand that we're not giving them bullshit.
I mean, you guys should tell Washington like a little bit how to do it, because I mean, I always tell my friends and stuff how crazy it is that in the world that we live in today, where people have a lot of different opinions, a lot of different topics, and you always, there's always just a lot of disagreements on certain topics. In the world of billfish, pretty much all, sport fish enthusiasts, they never ever kill a billfish, unless it's for a kill tournament, of course, right? But in general, the majority of the times, it's basically an unwritten rule, and it's frowned upon and literally disrespected if you do kill one. And it's been crazy to see that happen over time.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Nick, you've probably seen it over your career as well, right? Like I know my boss, Ellen, she would always say, she remembers when she was fishing in Pensacola in the 70s and 80s, it would just be, it didn't really matter, just bring in all the sailfish, everything, it didn't really matter. But you're right. At this point, it's essentially taboo to bring in fish unless it's for world record, unless it's during a tournament, and the good thing is this, and I want to make sure the listeners understand too, it's okay. TBF supports, we are not a fish hugging group at all. We're about responsible use. So as long as we don't go over our quota of billfish, specifically, I'm talking about US anglers, of the 250 marlin limit, then we're good. We're golden. If we go over that, then there's an issue. But we've never come that.
Where's that 250 marlin limit?
Yeah,
What is so where's that? Or
so it extends for all. So that's a great question. I'm sorry. And I'm always in the weeds. So this is a great question to kind of expand upon, Nick. So the US fleet, US recreational fleet is allotted 250 billfish landed every year. And 1 year we actually came fairly close. We came to about 220 something. And just to touch upon what we had talked about before, to where we are more of a self-regulating and more proactive group. Once the once the billfish tournaments realized what was going on and isolated, the areas that was happening at, a lot of the tournament directors said, we're going to increase the minimum size by 2, 3, 4 inches for white marlin, because it's mostly coming from white marlin tournaments. And that way we wouldn't come close to hitting that. So yeah, we have 250 billfish that are allotted to be landed within the Atlantic every year. As long as, like I said, as long as we don't hit that, our community is in good shape. If we do hit that, there are some really bad repercussions. So we always want to make sure that we never do that. But, if you guys have all fished all these tournaments, we've all been on the docks and seen billfish coming in, and that's fine, in my opinion, because we never go over a huge amount at these tournaments. Specifically, I'm thinking about blue marlin tournaments. And the more important fact is that, and you guys know this, or anybody that fishes for billfish know this, it's not like catching a snapper, okay? Yeah. You're going to catch maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 if you're super lucky, unless you're in like Costa Rica, Panama, or Dominican Republic, where you have fads, or you have, just a plethora of fish, right? A banner day in Florida would be catching 1 blue marlin in a season, maybe, right?
But where does sailfish fit into that?
It doesn't.
Okay.
So that's a great question. Sailfish are not in that. But going back to what Leo was saying though too, you can land a sailfish, and that happens once in a while, but it's still frowned upon. But here's the thing though too is, billfish, like I said, they're rare event species. You're not going to catch them literally every single time you go out fishing. If it was that, you wouldn't have these massive tournaments and massive boats going after them, right? And the reason I bring that up is as a scientist and as someone that's looking at their conservation and sustainability for our sport and community, the basis of our science comes from sometimes when these fish are landed. When we have scientists go to these tournaments, like the University of Southern Mississippi, like Jim Franks, who goes to all these tournaments in the deep South, whether it's Biloxi or ECBC or whatever like that, where they take all these samples of fish and they can actually produce science from that. The reason I bring that up again is because you look at all these other fish species, whether it's things from tuna or snapper or wahoo or mahi. Scientifically, we have a ton of data on them because they're easier to catch, they're targeted commercially. But when we're talking about billfish, we are still learning things to this day about them that are just very basic data. From just life history to age and growth. That's why we still have that tagging program that Leo and maybe Nick you know about. That's why we always encourage people to report, whether they're just releasing their fish, just to report, just because, man, we're always learning stuff about it. And we are TBF, but U.S. anglers specifically are the leaders in conservation when it comes to reporting and giving data. And it's super important to always get that data. So I'll back up a little bit. That's why I'm saying, TBF is all about responsible use. And that's why we can support some of these modified release tournaments, because a lot of those, and 99.9% of them that I know of that we're a part of, they produce science from it, right? They have scientists come there, they collect all the data. And I'll give you a great example. One of the tournaments that we went to a couple years ago, they had a new jackpot for swordfish. Huge, brought people from all over the place. I think it was like $250,000 for top, and win a free car or whatever like that. And it brought in a ton of swordfish, and people were like, oh, I can't believe they're bringing in all the swordfish. My colleagues from another side, not the fishing side, but the scientific side that were a little bit more green, so to speak. I said, let me tell you something. We're going to get probably 6 to 7, maybe 10, 20 different scientists looking at all this stuff. We're going to get multiple publications. We're going to have tons of different things out there because of that. And once I gave them that hard check or those hard facts, like, oh yeah, you're right, because there's not much information on, XYZ species. So, sorry, that's super long-winded.
No, yeah.
But I think it's a very important point.
I got so many questions.
yeah. Me too. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, please go right ahead.
Oh man, what was the tournament? Was it a couple years ago? Maybe was it the Big Rock or Pirates Cove when there was maybe close to 10 or 12 big fish killed?
Yeah, that was the Big Rock, and we actually had a slight snafu with them there because they landed so many that were just so close, and they just needed to tweak their and they did. They needed to tweak their
benchmark.
Yeah, they needed to tweak their threshold, their benchmark a little bit, and they should have reported. If something comes under, I think there were 10 or 15. I think it was close to 15 fish. You're right. I think it was about.
It was a lot.
It was a lot, and we went in their face essentially and said this is unacceptable because it gives our community a really bad light, and we knew it immediately. Once that happened, a bunch of people attacked our community, and the worst part too was they didn't have a scientist there.
Wow.
So they essentially, as far as I can remember, I don't think they had a scientist there. So all the fish there was just there. There was nothing that was done with them. And if you don't harvest the necessary parts quickly enough, there's no use to it.
Yeah.
You need to harvest it that day it comes in.
Did they change? Okay.
They did. To their credit, they did. They changed it. And I think the following year, because
it's amazing it's amazing what a conversation can do, huh?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the whole politics behind it, but yeah, that was a big issue, Nick, and you are 100% correct. But you don't normally see that. Normally when you go to these bigger billfish tournaments, you'll have, you might have like 20 like tuna come in, and you'll have maybe 1, 2, maybe 5 or 6 blue marlin come in, and maybe 2 or 3 whites, depending. I think the most I've ever seen personally was probably about 6 that have come in at one of the golf tournaments. Because most of the time they're not going to hit that 500-pound benchmark, or they're not going to hit what is the minimum size? Some of them are 110, some of them are 112. I know, and the minimum size is 99.
Yeah.
So,
how old is a 500-pound fish?
That's a great question. So it can vary, and I know that's a kind of a cop-out excuse, but it really varies on how well they've been eating. So we did a study just recently, and I can send you guys a link to this if you want later, if I can find it.
Please.
Yeah, so we did one where we had, I think, 1,200 hard parts, so pieces that we could do some age growth studies on. And we had 2 of our lead scientists look at it, and it was the largest study of its kind ever for blue marlin in the Atlantic. And it helped to estimate some of the ages for certain individuals. But to kind of get to your point, Nick, a 500 pounder can range to be, 10 to 15 years old, but it could also be a little bit older. But, also understanding that most of these fish don't live past 40. So, and most of those big fish, as you know, are all female. Anything over 300 to 350, those are all going to be your what does Ellen call it? Your big fat effing females. So those are the ones that you want to catch. You obviously sometimes you want to whack depending on what you're doing and what event you're at. But our goal a lot of times is to just help people understand where these fish are coming from, how big they get, where they're going, why they're going to certain places. And to kind of touch upon that last point too, is we just did a satellite tagging expedition recently, and it was at the Gulf of Mexico, and we tagged about 5 or 6 blues out there, and we were able to utilize what's called ocean heat index for the first time ever on billfish. It was the first study of its kind. And what that basically means, and I'm going to murder this, and the scientist, if he's ever hears this, will probably knock me upside the head. But basically, when you're looking at different physical oceanographic features, you're looking either at chlorophyll, the sea surface temperature, the wind, and all these other things. But ocean heat index is looking at almost like a 4D aspect of it. It's basically incorporating every single piece of information and then quantifying it. Okay, this is where the fish is most likely going to be because of XYZ. Not just one thing, but all of it at the same time. And basically, the scientist was saying, what did he say at the presentation? He said something of the sorts of, man, if I could get more tags on these fish, I could make a killing selling forecasting 10 times better than
I was literally about to ask
paraffin and all of that.
How much is your hourly rate to give like a forecast for a tournament?
Yeah, no, he was, so he had a presentation at our board, and what I can do, if you guys have any interest, I can send it to you guys if I get the authority.
Sure.
But what's really neat is it looks at, and we all know that, they look for certain eddies and stuff like that. And obviously the stronger eddies, it's going to kind of go around. But what was really interesting about this is they even go to the smaller eddies, which a lot of anglers
What are eddies? What are eddies?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I apologize. I'm once again, I'm just all stuff I talk about all the time. So eddies.
I know what it is, but you could probably explain it better than I can.
Maybe we'll see. Okay. So, so anyway, so eddies are essentially like currents, right? So like the loop current or the Gulf Stream. Okay. And then there are smaller eddies that break off. Think about it like the Louisiana Delta, right? Like that whole river. And then within the Delta, there are smaller rivers that connect into it. It's essentially like the same thing, but with ocean currents. And so you're looking at ocean currents. And what was really interesting was, like I said, and I'll share it with you guys if I get the okay from the president, El Jefe. But it was really cool information, and it's probably information and analysis that we'll move forward with on the next satellite tagging expedition that'll happen. Knock on wood, actually, Leo, maybe in Mag Bay next year with a couple of boats that as well. So
awesome.
Yeah,
that's gonna be good.
All right, sorry, I gotta just retract again real quick. So
a
blue marlin, you said only lives to 40 years, roughly.
Roughly about 40 years.
And that's obviously a 40-year-old fish. Is it technically a grander by then?
They can be. Once again, it all depends on the food, but they're going to be bigger fish for sure.
How she's been eating.
They're not going to be 300 or 400 pounds. They're definitely going to be on the larger side. I would estimate easily over 700 to 800 pounds.
And I've heard rumors. I mean, I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe you could clarify it. Do males at some point become females, or they strictly stay males?
That I've never heard of for marlin. They're not like. No, but that does happen.
I've heard that.
That's actually a great question, because in a bunch of fish that does happen. I've never heard of that, Nick. I don't know 100%, and that's a great question. I think the reason that people won't be able to answer that with 100% accuracy is because no one's ever tracked the same fish for so long to determine whether or not they've changed, and there's no way to see if essentially their sexual organs have changed. But while that is funny, it does happen in a number of fish.
I couldn't help myself.
Like sheep's head in the Pacific, they do that. When one male has a more dominant, they do it by mouth. If they have the bigger mouth, then the smaller one becomes female. And then there were some instances recently to where one of my colleagues mentioned that they read some study to where there was a lone shark in an aquarium and no other sharks of its species there. And it was a male, and it did change and actually gave birth to pups, which didn't make any sense.
Wow.
But I mean, I have to look into that a little more. But Nick, that's actually a great question, but I don't think anyone could, at least at this point, give a 100% definitive, and at least from my understanding. And I don't know enough about billfish sexuality in terms of that, but in terms of that, but I mean, I can definitely ask a couple buddies for sure.
No, I was curious. Quick break, everyone. We usually don't run ads, but considering it is holiday season, we'll be running sales up to 50% off. So please check out our website at billfishgear.com, and also check out our co-host website, hookedoptics.com. Thanks for listening.
Let me ask you a question, Peter, because I deal with this a lot since I manage the social media pages for the company.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on someone who's out fishing They catch 600, 700, maybe even 800, whatever, blue marlin, and decide to board it because it's catch for a lifetime. Do you think that's okay?
I think it's different for every, depending on the situation, right? Mm-hmm. Once again, we are for responsible use. That's
why I was asking.
Right. So, I mean, if you are out there and it is a legitimate once in a lifetime catch, and that's probably the only fish you're ever going to whack, or you're in a tournament that's going to, or it's a state record or something like that. I don't think that's a problem. Mm-hmm. I do think, if you're going to harvest a marlin, it better be a once in a lifetime kind of thing. Because like I said, we want to make sure that there's fish out there for future generations, but I don't want to take out, let's say, for example, you guys are fishing in, at the Bisbees or at Biloxi or at the Mid-Atlantic, let's say. You're in the Mid-Atlantic. They had that record, those 2 amazing blue marlin they caught this year, and I was there for that. I'm not going to say no, because I also understand, let's say for the tournament, okay? Let's say this is for a tournament. The amount of press that tournament gets from that one fish, the amount of boats that will come back because of that one fish, the amount of money and revenue that community will then benefit from, I mean, it's
far outweighs.
Yeah, like I said, we are all about responsible use. We're not about stacking fish. We look at it, and I look at it personally as, listen, these fish command respect, but they also command respect not only from the anglers, but from the community too, because those communities that are dependent on them, whether it's Los Cabos or whether it's Ocean City or whether it's Florida, the state of Florida, those fish command attention from not only anglers, but from the general community because they bring in so much money and so many people to the area. Think about, one of the reasons why I love living in Florida, same thing probably with you, Nick, is because fishing is ridiculous and there's water everywhere and you can do anything you want here, right? Like absolutely. Legitimately anything, right? And if Florida didn't have, the management that it does now in terms of really promoting sport fishing, really having the infrastructure for it, obviously having the huge coastline definitely helps, right? And having the Everglades. But if they didn't have what it has in terms of being able to promote all that stuff, no one's going to come. No one's going to want to go tarpon fishing in the Everglades. No one's going to want to go looking for peacock bass here. No one's going to want to look for sailfish just in the Gulf Stream, 7 to 8 miles away, So sorry, long story short, no. As long as it's done responsibly, I have no problem with it.
I think that's something that makes the Billfish Foundation super unique and, in my opinion, have a very high integrity because it's reasonable. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna, I can only speak for myself, but I've been fishing for the last forever. I've never killed a billfish, and I've never seen a billfish get killed on a boat that I've fished on. And I can sit here and say that if I ever catch 900-pound blue marlin on my boat, that thing is coming inside. You know what I mean? And it's going to be, one-time thing. And I think that should be reasonable. And I think that hearing you say that just kind of is really cool because I think especially on social media, we'll post a photo of someone, with a big blue marlin, and you'll always find people, what? No, how? And I always like to think, the world isn't black or white. It's gray. You gotta
never know what the situation is too.
Yeah, you need to be able to judge make a decision based on the circumstances that are at hand.
Yeah, I will say, one of the things I always forget to talk about when people do land those big fish. So let's say, Leo, you happen to catch a 700-pound blue, right? Or an amazing 100-pound white marlin. If you do catch it, and I would say this to anyone in the community, let us know immediately, and maybe you could actually harvest some of those parts for us. And basically all that would entail is basically taking a circular saw and chopping off the head. And then so we could then and then you could take off the bill, obviously, as well. And then we could potentially send it to some of our scientists for some of their sampling. Okay. And actually, I know one scientist specifically who would love anything over 750. If they do catch any, they'll probably pay for the shipping as well, just to get more information. And really, to your point before, Nick, of just understanding, okay, are our age estimates correct?
Yeah.
Are we missing anything? Are we missing something? And these bigger fish, as we've talked about during this call, is we just don't know enough about them. So anytime that we can get more information, especially about the older girls, the better. So
yeah. And do you guys have any like idea of just how healthy the numbers are in, let's say, Atlantic?
Yes, so that's a great question. It depends on the species. We are not at the point to where we have to worry about them being prohibited in terms of taking. Like, I'm not sure if you heard, but mako sharks for the next 2 years, U.S. anglers, as well as anyone in the Atlantic, you are prohibited from landing any mako sharks moving forward.
Any short fin or long fin?
I believe it's short fin only.
Okay.
And I have to double check with that, but it just passed last month, and that's going to take effect real soon. And that's going to potentially cause some problems for some people, and we understand within our community. But going back to your question, the stocks are stable. The biggest problem that we always have is the fact that the U.S. are typically the standard bearers when it comes to reporting their data, whether it's the recreational community and whether it's the commercial community. We have to report, and we're the standard bearers for reporting all the data. Other countries, I'm not going to name names, other countries don't at all. When I know they have recreational fleets in Europe specifically, or I know they have recreational fleets somewhere in South America or in the Caribbean, and they report zero recreational effort, which is a whole bunch of BS. Or when their commercial fleets say, no, we caught, I'm just hypothetical numbers, 2 million metric tons of yellowfin tuna, but we caught no billfish.
Yeah, it's
bullshit.
Yeah.
That's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things that we constantly do, and we work with, we're a part of a fisheries management organization, ICAT, that basically manages all these stocks. We always try to drive home, report your fucking fish.
Yeah.
It's without data, like actual data, there's no way you can properly manage the stocks. And the fear for me within conservation and within our community for the sport fishing group is that all of a sudden they're going to be like, oh, stock is crashing because, blah, blah, blah. And then I can just see ourselves saying it's because no one is reporting data. Mm-hmm. And I know certain countries are probably trying to do that because of that, to where they're just causing this
imbalance
and kind of like, oh, is it this or is it not? It's always a uphill battle, but it's a battle that we are basically going to essentially die on that hill for, right? Like, mm-hmm. We want to make sure that our community always has access and always has rights to fish our waters or any other waters that we want to responsibly, period. End of story.
Yeah.
And we always like to put it this way, like, if you're not going to report, if certain countries aren't going to report, we don't want to promote those areas, right? Mm-hmm. Like, those are areas sometimes, and granted, most of those countries, most anglers that I know of probably will never go to, but there are some others that we definitely go to that it just grinds my gears, mm-hmm. to quote the great Peter Griffin, right? So, but yeah, no, sorry. So Nick, once again, long-winded story, but stocks are stable, but we can always do better in terms of getting data.
Let me ask you this, Peter. Again, I have a lot of these questions because I see and hear people ask us right on social media, and I answer the best of my ability with the experience that I have. I would prefer to just kind of ask you directly and get the concrete facts and truth, at least as close to it as possible. We saw a video go around on Instagram which was posted by a captain. I will not name his name because he is known for not participating in the whole conservation road that we're talking about here.
Okay.
Of a sailfish floating around belly up off the coast of South Florida, and basically scoffing off at tournament fishermen about, you guys are, catching all these sailfish, you quick release, wrap around your head and break it off. This is what happens. And you see the sailfish floating belly up like that. Now, someone commented on that and asked, us for our thoughts on that, which, I gave, which is something along the lines of, there's an exception to every rule. in short. But Peter, what do you kind of think about that?
Yeah,
Is there any truth to that? What the self-fishing people do in South Florida, where you get a release in 5 minutes, wrap the leader, break it off, hook rusts away.
No, that's a great question. So here's the thing: is that if you have a fish on the line for a couple minutes, you're not putting a lot of stress on the fish, unless you essentially gut hooked it, right? And you're using J hooks and gut hooking it somehow. In my opinion, if you just quick snap it off, is that the best option? No, of course not. The preferable thing would be to obviously revive the fish the best as possible, but that's not going to happen. I'm not stupid. I know that doesn't happen during tournaments, and that's fine. But for that individual to say this happens on every single sailfish, or it happens not whatever majority of the time, I don't think that's the case at all.
To be again, I appreciate like the truth and stuff. He didn't say every single sailfish, and he didn't say majority of the time, but he just says like it happens often or frequently. And
listen, I've been on boats here in South Florida, some South Florida tournament boats, a good number of them, I'd like to say. I've never seen that happen. Does that happen? It could. I mean, I could also win the lottery tomorrow too, right? So
yeah. Nick, you've probably fished at the coast of South Florida more than me and Peter combined. Have you ever? How many times has that happened to you, or at all, that you've seen a sailfish just randomly floating around belly up?
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously, if you catch a lot of fish, it's gonna happen. You know, I'm not gonna lie. But that's gonna tend on where the fish is hooked. You know, if it's hooked in the gut, then there's a good chance that's gonna happen. But
no, I don't know. Sorry, I mean like that you're just kind of fishing and you see a random sailfish float by belly up.
Oh no,
I've
never seen just a sailfish float by. That. But I'm just saying, like one of our own that we've hooked that, you know, we released, and then you could tell that most likely that fish is not going to make it. But at that same time, you know, a lot of this, especially, you know, guys in South Florida, and I'm sure up the coast too, you know, we're using such light leader that I think, you know, as fast as we're catching those fish, you know, I don't think we're causing too much harm to them, even when it breaks. Because I think when that leader breaks, I think it's breaking pretty close to right in the mouth. I mean, obviously, I never want to see a fish swim away with 5-6 feet of line hanging out of its mouth. You know,
I like to think, you know, to kind of jump on that talking point too, Nick, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know any professional, let alone, you know, weekend warrior angler. They don't want to see that. They don't want to see line like that. They do the best to always either take the hook out or cut it as close as possible. Once again, I like to think our community on a majority is conservation minded, because they don't want to shoot themselves in the foot again. You know, especially if you're tournament fishing and someone sees that, the boat next to you sees that happening, that's not kosher. No one's going to want to see that. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times you're going to err on the side of doing the best you can to make sure it breaks off cleanly and the best as possible. And, you know, I think we've all kind of been there to see, you know, a fish gets tail wrapped, and, you know, sometimes that's, you know, it's unavoidable sometimes, depending on how many lines are out and what's going on in the pit and everything like that. So once again, I have not seen that video, Leo, so I haven't seen that yet, but it would be interesting to see where and how that fish was actually caught. And like, unless he saw someone actually do it.
No, it was just randomly. He was just kind of doing his thing and just randomly saw, you know, that sailfish just pass by. But you know how the world that we live in, Peter. You see one thing, see one thing once, and that happens all the time, blah blah, and it causes, you know, disruption and engagement, which drives views and likes, and, you know, that's just the world we live in, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay, let me ask you. Go ahead, Nick.
So just a different off that topic now, but where does back to like the whole, I guess, blue marlin numbers and spearfish and stuff, where does Hawaii fit into this? Because I know those guys, you know, I'm not hating on them, but I know that they kill, you know, they eat them, you know, and they kill a lot of their fish. Yeah.
So that's a different thing. So once again, so the marlin limit that we talked about, the 250, that's only Atlantic wide.
Okay.
So Pacific has a whole different set of rules. And really, when you think about marlin
fishing, you guys involved in those rules?
So we're involved internationally. So, and really, I'll say this. So Hawaii is a different animal. They have traditional rights there as well. I know a bunch of friends, a bunch of captains out there. They eat spearfish out there. When I wish they would tag and release them, but I also understand, if they're hungry and they want to eat it, that's fine. And they're not wasting it. One of the things that I've always suggested them doing is send some of the scientists I know some of their hard parts. That way we can get even more useful data out of outside of the fish tacos you're doing. Let's get something more beneficial or add more beneficial stuff to when you're catching those fish. So another example, Nick, is like when TBF had a project down in the DR, we kept on hearing about all the pangas down there. This is probably 10 years ago at this point, before Cap Cana and Casa de Campo were really, really big.
Yeah.
And we had heard that, one of the local fishing villages in San Pedro, they were catching a bunch of our tagged fish. And I was like, well, shit, man, I want to get that data. I want that data. I want to close the loop so we can get a better understanding of these fish and who's catching them, whatever. And a bunch of people were like, how can you work with those guys that are killing our fish and they're eating our fish? I'm like, well, listen, if I don't talk to them, I won't get that data. And that data is going to essentially help our entire community out. Yeah. And I know they're not wasting that fish because I lived with a couple of them down there as well for about a week or two, and they use everything. Yeah. They don't put anything to waste. They eat every single part of the fish. Have I eaten billfish before? Yes, I have, just out of respect. If someone serves me in a different country and if I'm a guest in their house or a host at their event, I've had sailfish before, and I've had, I think, marlin before. But just out of respect. Will I openly seek it out? Absolutely not. Yeah. But I'm sure you guys have been put in that situation though too, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a reasonable man. Huh? Oh right. My God. I love to hear it. I mean, it's kind of a breath of fresh air to see people just, there's an exception to every rule, and depending on what situation, you act accordingly.
Yeah, when I went to a tournament, the Japanese International Billfish Tournament, their biggest tournament out of Shimoda, Japan. It's like 120 boats, and they all do this without money. It's just literally for honor. Really? They call from all over the country. It's pretty awesome, actually, and the food is fantastic. The organizers, they took me out, and
that's a kill tournament.
It is, It is a modified release. Since I'm there, they were tagging, but they do kill for sure. But what they do is when they kill it, they serve it to the entire crowd. They give it to the scientists as well. But while I'm there, they said, "Here, would you please try some?" I'm saying, I am not going to go to someone's central tournament I didn't fly 20,000 miles away to disrespect them. Right? They gave me some really funky food, but hell, I'm going to try every single thing that they put in front of my face just out of respect for them, because the worst thing that you can do, and they actually mentioned to me later, at least in Japan, the worst thing you could do is not accept or even try, what they're offering. And there were a couple representatives from a couple of corporations that didn't have the palate for it, didn't want to try it, and they were essentially frowned upon. So I learned my lesson very quickly after hearing that story. That's never going to happen to me. I'm always going to be respectful and understanding. And Leo, you said it perfectly before. You never know what situation you're kind of looking at or in. So I always try to step back a little bit, try to see it from not only my point of view, but another person's point of view. As long as they provide, pertinent facts or pertinent information, I'm always going to make sure. And I like to think TBF does at the same time. We always try to make sure that we are very cognizant of the situation. We're always looking to benefit our community 100%, and that is our focus. But at the same point, we're always going to make sure that we're cognizant of all the other issues that are happening at the same time.
Let me ask you this, Peter. There's a lot of talks about Mac Bay specifically that I really wanted to talk to you about.
Sure.
Because there's always just, people talk. Nobody really knows what the fuck they're talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
So I wanted to ask you. So obviously Mac Bay, known for just incredible next level striped marlin fishing. There's talks or fears that with all these, East Coast boats and big sport fishing boats coming in and now all doing Mac Bay, that's going to like affect the fishery. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, affect the fishery how? Do you mean affect the fishery as in increase the amount of money going into the area? Hells yeah, it will.
Oh, of course.
Or do you mean like they're going to close down the fishery?
It's just going to impact the amount of bites that you can get and take away from the natural amazingness of it.
So that's hard to say because it depends on, I like to think that most of the boats that are going out there, like some of the boats that we know, whether it's the Big O or Fish Tank or the 8/8 or some of the ones that I know of out there, they are pretty much, they're some of the creme de la creme. Okay. And they don't fuck around, right? They're there to fish. They don't want they want the fish to stay the way they are. And as an angler or as a captain, Nick, you probably know, if the bite's off, you're going to move to the next spot, right? So I understand the fears that some people have about Mag Bay, and obviously specifically, is it going to be too hot to where people are, the fishery is going to be affected? Maybe, but I look at Isla. Isla is still a great fishery, and has been. I look at Costa Rica. That's only ballooned. And it's still a phenomenal fishery. Granted, there's still fads out there, but the fishery is still good. Guatemala is still great. Panama is still great.
What do you mean with a balloon?
Balloon. In terms of it's
blowing up.
Progressed. Yeah, it's blowing up.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. So, is there a possibility that the fishery could be affected? Sure, if it's not properly managed and taken care of. But most of these boats, from what I understand, they're leaving from Cabo. They're taking their bladders and they're going all the way up to Mag Bay. Because there's no real infrastructure there for a lot of that in Mag Bay. Am I correct? I have never been to Mag Bay. I've only been
So I've been there. There's this little place that you can fuel up there. And I know Big O has been doing a lot of that. So you can. It's just not. It's not easy. You know what I mean? It's not like a perfect fuel up, but yeah, you can.
I don't think Mag Bay will. Well, I'm not going to say never. At this point, Mag Bay will never be on par with, let's say, Cabo San Lucas. Cabo San Lucas is
that's next level.
It's like Las Vegas, right? Yeah. Just kind of, right? Mag Bay still has the appeal of this amazing fishery that's hard to get to, right? To where you still have that pristine side. You are getting more boats there, but a lot of the boats I feel that are going there that I know of are not going to, basically, they don't want to be the ones to be outed, right? Most of those boats aren't going to be like, they're not going to, stack fish on the deck. They're not going to, try to rip out hooks all the time. These are the boats that they're spending a lot of money to get out there to get a lot of fish. And they want to go back every year. Like you talk to the Big O, you talk to Fish Tank, you talk to any of these other boats. They want to go to Mag Bay every single year from now on, right? And obviously new boats want to go there. These other big boats, like the one I just talked about with 8/8s, they made their first trip out there and they had an amazing time. But is there a possibility? Sure. I don't think it will unless you start to see infrastructure really build there to the point to where it gets really easy to get to. And then that's when you might start to see the fishery decline. The one thing that you'd have to worry about, that we always worry about, especially when it comes over to Mexico, is the recreational fleet outside of the boats that we mentioned, are they, I'm not going to say educated, but do they understand what they have there? And then more importantly, on top of that, or maybe even more importantly, is the government properly managing the area to make sure that the commercial fleets are away from that area as well? Do they know that they have a golden egg right there?
A wonder of the world.
Exactly. And, that's one of the things that we had to display to them. This was over a decade ago now too, maybe 8 years ago or something like that. We had to show Los Cabos, or Cabo San Lucas. We did a 2-year socioeconomic study of that area. This is, like I said, 8 years ago or so. And they were going to open up long lines in that area, just right outside the Arches area. And we did a 2-year socioeconomic study that basically illustrated that Los Cabos gets $1.25 billion annually from sport fishing.
Wow.
That's not chump change.
No.
I think it brought over 64,000 jobs to the area. And we told them, and the study basically said, you fuck this up, you're going to screw yourself. You're screwing your entire economy. You're screwing all these people out of jobs. And it's something that we talk about all the time. Whenever I have a chance to go to Cabo, I said, we talk to the charge. I'm like, land one or two maybe, but keep some of those fish out there, because once this fishery goes, people are going to go somewhere else. We're going to go to Costa Rica. We're going to go to Guatemala. We're going to go to Magbay or something else that's going to have a better fishery, right? Like, you know, one of my friends was talking about, what was it? He kept on hearing about the sail fishing out of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, you know, how they would catch, 50 to 100 sailfish a day out there just in these small pangas. But, anglers and captains want to go where it's essentially virgin territory, whether it's Colombia or Ecuador or Panama or, anywhere that's kind of new to, stroke the ego a little bit too, to say I was one of the first, whether it's, Cabo Blanco and catching the 1800 pound black marlin, or something like that. So it's always important. And I think I'd like to hope, back to your comment, Leo, is that these communities, and specifically the ones that have established infrastructures, they understand that this is a renewable and sustainable resource. And as long as they can keep that resource viable and healthy, they have legitimately a golden egg every year that will produce so much money for them. And for a long time, a lot of people thought TBF was based off science, advocacy, which is true, 100%. But we have augmented that to where over the past 2 decades, we're saying this. And a lot of times this is going to make the governments move a lot quicker to support our community. Once they start seeing, these multi-million-dollar floating yachts come in, spending $50,000 on gas, right? That are spending, tens of thousands of dollars on bait, then they're starting to see, oh shit, we have something here, right? We really have something. We can promote this a little bit better. If we could promote this, we can create a little infrastructure, we can create management here. Man, we could really do ourselves a favor and really help our community out too.
But how's Costa Rica doing with this? Because, we had Bubba Carter on a podcast recently, and, he says the long ladders are affecting the Costa Rica fishery.
That is definitely an issue that we always face. I wish this was an easy job, and I like to think it's all fun and games, but it's not. A lot of times it's hard work. It's banging on doors. It's trying to kick down doors sometimes too.
Like, why is Costa Rica allowing that to happen?
I think a lot of times, I hate to pin it on this, and it happens everywhere really. It tends to happen more in developing nations, and more nations that don't realize what's going on. Is a lot of these are short-term interests that are being pocketed. I'm just going to flat out say it. Sometimes it's corruption. Sometimes it's the administration changing. There's lots of different factors in it. Costa Rica is, and Bubba's right. He has a great charter down there. That's a great fishery out there. Has it suffered a little bit? For sure. And that's why people have put out fads. So, places to where people can fish that they don't know where things are, or they don't know where these fads are, but only these private ones. Costa Rica is a tough one though. And some of these international nations are tough just because once you build the relationship with an administration, they change. And then you've got to start all over again. And that can be, to say god awful would be an understatement. Right? You're basically working from ground zero again to try to convince these people. And a lot of times they're replacing everybody in the administration, right? Everyone from top to bottom. And some people that have no interest in fisheries at all, they're just looking for the biggest gain in the short amount of time, because they also understand that they might not be there for a long time as well. So sometimes the best interests are not there. I can't specifically, unfortunately, Nick, tell you why that's happening in Costa Rica, because a lot of my focus has been more on the Atlantic side recently over the past couple of years. But I've definitely heard that. I've definitely heard that's happening. We've talked to a couple of people specifically out of Los Sueños that are having some issues to where they're seeing a lot of sailfish specifically being caught and even sold in markets. It's something that we're going to take a look at a little bit more in 2022, but a lot of our focus this year, unfortunately, has not been on that. And just for your listeners to know, we are a small team. We are a lean and mean team of 3. And we try to do a lot. And I like to think we were lean and mean because we utilize the funds that we get to the best of our abilities. The more funds we get, the more we can do to where we can essentially hire, or we can fly out here and do all this. But I want to let the listeners know, man, I like to think we do a lot with a little. And the more support that our organization gets, as well as other conservation organizations get, the more good we can do for the community.
Yeah. Let's bounce to the Dominican Republic. I've heard, some of the older guys that dislike the fads in DR. Does that affect the blue marlin migratory,
Awesome question again. Yeah, Nick, awesome question. Seriously. And so there is conflicting data on that. There isn't enough scientific work and publications to document that, but the ones that have come out have gone back and forth about whether or not it actually changes migration patterns. And the reason why it's conflicting is a lot of people will say, well, why the F are these fish going to move if the food is right there, right? I mean, it's just simple. You're going to go where you're going to get fed and where there's other fish of your kind so you can procreate. Fish are pretty simple that way. Or lots of animals are pretty simple that way. Lots of humans are that way too, right? Obviously. But others have seen, we've seen just tracking of fish that I know people caught off fads. Maybe I've even caught a couple that have been recaptured as well. But we've seen fish move thousands of miles.
Yeah.
And once again, I can show some of this to your followers later too. Is we've had a couple gone. I think we had one that was awesome that came actually from La Guera, from Venezuela. I know that's not a fat area, but then went all the way up to like Montauk, New York, in like 87 days.
Wow.
But we've also had some, that I know that have been caught off fads and recaptured later. I think it's either the Bahamas or, where they've gone, they're not just residential.
Yeah. And those fish, at least the way I look at it, those fish are like kind of cookie cutter, small fish, and you tend not to catch bigger fish there. So you would think the bigger they get, they're like, all right, let's move on and eat bigger bait, because technically where we're fishing in the fads, a lot of the bait there is small,
Small. Yeah, that's correct. Most of the fish that you get in the DR, maximum blue marlin is maybe 300 pounds, 350.
Max. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's the biggest I've ever seen out there. And that's fine. And the one reason behind that, one of our scientists would probably kick me for saying this too, but the DR, Puerto Rico, that Mona Passage area, there's a certain area around there that is actually supposedly a breeding ground for blue marlin, white marlin, as well as some forage fish, some prey species as well. So there's some talk of, or there had been some talk in the past about maybe even making certain areas off limits for a certain amount of time, just to make sure that those species can, obviously procreate in peace, kind of thing. But this kind of goes back though to what we were talking about before with some of the eddies and some of those currents, right? The only reason some of these fish are going to move is if the eddies move too. They're only going to be, they want to be comfortable. They want to be in a comfortable area, and they want to go where the bait is. So,
all right.
Awesome. What are your thoughts on, I remember there was this one crazy year in December when Bluebird and Waterman, they caught like 25 blue marlin. They were all super, super juvenile. Do you remember that, Peter?
No, I don't.
What? Of course. There was when they were coming in with like 25 blue marlin. I think that record still holds in the DR. It's 25 or 26 blue marlin in one day. That was in December. You don't remember that? That was the craziest thing. They were all catching. They were super, super small.
This was a couple of years ago.
Yes, this was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Was that like an eye opener for TBF? Because like they were really, really small, and I've never seen it before. We never saw it after again either.
Yeah, so
like
I had a couple calls with who was it at the time? I think I was talking with captain of the Betsy,
Tim,
Captain Popfinger. Yeah, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
He called me about it. He's like, yeah, we're catching like 40, 50 maybe 100-pound blue marlin. There was some talk, at least in the science world, that could be due to maybe the El Nino that happened that year, or the big sargassum push that happened, because there was a huge.
That year. Yep.
Right. That's what I thought, and to where I was talking to Tim, and this is just speculation on my part, but that offered a lot more shelter for a lot of those fish, a lot of the small fish to actually survive, because most of the time when you don't have that big sargassum there, those tiny juveniles are going to be picked off, right? Especially at the smaller when they're literally like plankton size, they're a couple inches. But whenever you go and if you're casting out in a sargassum patch, you're going to get mahi, you're going to get triple tails or whatever else. But if you ever have the chance to actually dive inside one of them, you'll probably see a ton of juvenile fish in there too. And one of the thoughts I had with one of my colleagues is like, there's the possibility of, because there's so much more shelter and habitat, that there's going to be an explosion of juvenile fish, because there's just so much more protection for them, so much more shelter for that. You're right. That did happen about 2 to 3 years ago, I think, at this point. Yeah, no, that's right. And specifically out of the DR. I don't remember it being 20 to 25, but I do remember that huge explosion. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure record is 23 and a white, something like that. But yeah, bluebird or waterman, one of the two. But like they were going like, every day at the marina, they come back at like 8 p.m. and it's just flags. Everyone was losing their mind. Everyone's losing their mind.
Yeah.
Well, we caught 16 last year on the Marlin Darlin, 16 two whites in a sail. I'd say all those 16 of those blue marlin, I would say none of them were over 80 pounds. And I'd say the smallest was probably 30 pounds.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, no, it's weird. Like I said, one of our scientists, Dr. Arocha from Venezuela, he did a lot of work specifically out of the DR about 25 years ago. And he's the scientist I was mentioning before that said that the DR Puerto Rico area, there's an area right, I think it's the DR actually. It's the northeast side of the island where he thinks that there is a possible breeding ground for blues, whites, and I think he said eels. And those and he said that those eels happen to be just the type of prey that the super small marlin just feast upon, and that's why they're there. Obviously, it could depend year by year, depending on the Gulf Stream, depending on El Nino, La Niñas, climate change, whatever you want to say. But yeah, he was the one that has always quoted me and always saying, not quoted me, I'm quoting him saying that there's a possible breeding ground over there that we need to potentially be aware of. And those small fish, to your point too, Nick, those like a 30-pound fish is probably 1 to 2 years old. Just thinking about maybe 3 or 4, maybe. Thinking about sailfish, how big they get. Most of the sailfish here in Florida, are 25, 50 pounds maybe. And a couple of my colleagues were saying that, some of those are 25 pounders are about a year old. They are voracious eaters. And especially when they're like this size, they can eat 4 to 5 times their body weight, to where they've seen their stomachs like a Buddha belly, essentially, like the Buddha behind me, right? Have that big Buddha belly full of stuff when they're actually like looking at them in a microscope. They have all these things in their stomach.
Wow. What about a hatchet marlin?
What about them?
What
round scale spearfish?
Because that's always what I like when I hear. I think I've actually caught one. I have a picture.
You probably
of me.
have. You probably have
caught one.
I caught this fish some years ago with my dad, and we have a picture of it. And I remember I told people I caught a world record white marlin, and then this is when I worked for Ray Rocher, and he's like, no, that's a hatchet marlin, and I was like, oh wow, like I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a picture of it, Nick, I can help you verify.
I don't have it on me right now, but I can.
No. But later. Yeah, you could email it to me later. That's fine. I can verify with by looking at it, or maybe having a buddy take a look at it.
Do they ever get killed in, let's say, the White Marlin Open, and they get mistaken? And
it counts. So a lot of times with these tournaments, they will once they come in they'll separate them, but they'll be classified as white marlin. So
and are they a hybrid, or are they actually their
completely
own
separate species? No. This is a great question. No need to laugh.
No, these are questions I hear all the time.
No, these are great questions. So, and this actually happened really recently especially specifically scientifically, they just got identified as a separate species about 6 to 8 years ago. Dr. Graves and his team at VIMS, they helped, and this is through the White Marlin Open, I believe, in the Mid-Atlantic. They were able to, sequentially, look at their DNA and say, these are actually different fish, different species of fish. So no, that's a great question. They definitely get lumped in together. Does that tick me off? Yes, because I think they should be separated. But that's not going to happen, at least for right now. I always like to say, once again, it's kind of like a broken record. So with like the Mid-Atlantic, the scientists come in, they harvest them, and they can easily identify them, and then they'll take what they need to do the research that they need to do with it. The one thing I actually forgot that you had mentioned, Nick, that made me think about that I want to talk to you and the listeners about too, is that we have this juvenile billfish project as well that we're working with Dr. Arocha on. And what that is basically if you or your colleagues or anyone else, anyone that's fishing out there, they happen to spot a juvenile billfish, marlin or sailfish, anything under about, let's say, 2 feet in total length, please send us a picture, the Latin long, and the specific location, and the date. Excuse me, I already said the location and the date.
I caught one yesterday.
Yeah. So if you can,
I caught a sailfish this big yesterday.
Awesome. So yeah, that's perfect. So if you guys and your listeners can ever send us pictures of the location and the date, that really helps us out, because right now there's no repository for any of that. And what we would do with that information is essentially try to figure out through the Latin long, through the date of where these fish were actually traveling, by understanding, once again, I'm going to talk about the currents, where the currents are going, because some of these fish sometimes can't really outswim these currents. So these currents can help actually push these fish to certain areas. So we can actually pinpoint where these fish might have actually originally come from. So yeah, super helpful. We've gotten probably several dozen pictures over the past year, but the larger this becomes, the more data we can get, and the better we can help to figure out, to really figure out where these fish are actually coming from, where their potential actually getting spawned at, and so forth. So
nice.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this, Peter. You said you guys were doing research at Mag Bay 8 years ago. That's way before anyone even knew what Mag Bay was.
Los Cabos. No, not in Mag Bay, unfortunately. So we did it specifically the Los Cabos region, and all we did was socioeconomic. We did a little bit of research out of Cabo San Lucas, but I think that was, and I have to double check, that might have been with a couple of satellite tags, but nothing specifically out of Mag Bay. I do know people that had fished there for over a decade, for sure. But no research, unfortunately. Okay.
Well, you seem to be on a cutting edge of kind of fishing hotspots. What's the next underrated top spot that we got to go check out?
I mean, I like to think a lot of Asia is kind of untapped. A lot of places people don't think about. So I'll give you a great example, like the Kuala Lumpur. That's amazing sail fishery. Infrastructure is kind of sort of there. It's super fun. A lot of people don't think of Japan as actual blue marlin hotspot, but it is. They've got a really nice.
What does that mean? Can you kind of give numbers?
Sure. So if you fish out of Yokohama, or you fish out of even Okinawa, there's a really nice warm water current there, and they catch a good deal of blue marlin. And actually, about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a couple of Japanese anglers and captains win for our top tagging captain or angler in the entire Pacific, because they would catch 70 in one year, which is amazing, right? Yeah. I do think there are parts of Latin America that are untouched. I think Colombia, if it stabilizes a little bit more, I think that has a lot of potential. I don't know. I mean,
Ecuador, you said, I know I've actually ran into a guy that showed me pictures of sick fishing down there.
Yeah, I mean,
and they kill them all.
Yeah, I mean, they
God.
eat them all. They eat them all. Yeah. So that's the thing. Like we had tried, and we'll segue to. I did some research when I was in grad school out in Galapagos, and I was like, oh, gotta go fishing out here. It's got to be amazing because there's literally fish everywhere, everywhere. And but it's very heavily regulated, and the fishing at that time, this is about 15 to 20 years ago, was not super easy. You had to actually find locals to go out with. And because it's a World Heritage Site, it's a little difficult. But yeah, Ecuador, if you can get out there, is a good one. I know there's some operations out of Galapagos now. I think Colombia has a couple. I know Panama. Why can't I think of the one other country right by Ecuador? Colombia.
I've seen some guys fishing Cuba.
So Cuba is an interesting one. I went there a couple of years ago to promote sport fishing, and specifically offshore sport fishing with the government there. That one's an interesting one because they want to do something, but they don't have the means to do it. It's also very hard for, I think, especially U.S. anglers to get there. Mm-hmm. It got easier recently. To where you could actually fly from Miami or Fort Lauderdale directly to Cuba. But before, you had to fly into Mexico to get over there, or go to Canada and then fly down. And it wasn't super simple. But no, there's definitely fish there, clearly. Like Hemingway, obviously. And we've had a number of recaptures out of that area. They just don't have the infrastructure. Gotcha. I don't know if either of you had the opportunity to get over there, but they had the one yacht club in Havana, the Hemingway Yacht Club, which was a part of TBF for a little while, but it's pretty basic. It's very quaint, but they can't hold many boats. It's not a Los Sueños, it's not like Sailfish Marina. It's a little bit different, but if you're okay to rough it out and you're up for adventure, it might be a good spot for you. Their techniques too aren't there either. So let's say, Nick, you take the boat down there. You might have a really good opportunity to catch a bunch of fish, but you also have to go through the hoops and ladders of going to customs and going through that whole thing. And
we love foreign customs.
Yeah, I mean, customs is a nightmare. Yeah. So I just remember going through, just even getting my bag in the airport, and I just had a small carry-on or two small carry-ons. And it took like 2 hours for them just to sift through every single person's bag. I'm like, man, I just want to go. I don't know. Anyway.
Gotcha. Yeah. Nick, do you have anything else?
I don't know. I feel like I just keep on going.
I mean, I'm happy to come. I'm happy to come back on. My wife says I talk way too much anyway. So anytime you guys want, I'm happy to be involved. I want to also thank you guys for the donation that you guys had for our recent fundraiser. That went off really well. I'll probably hit you up again for another fundraiser in the future. Cool. But I definitely, like I said, like you were talking about before, Leo, I think there's a lot of synergy in terms of the fact that some of our big players in our foundation and our members happen to be on your pro staff. I'm guessing that's what they are. To where we can work out something.
We don't really call it pro staff. I mean, I think what really makes our brand cool is that, it's really by fishermen for fishermen. And I think people kind of relate with what the brand stands for.
It's also a really good design.
Yeah.
Simple. It's simple, but it's perfect. It's to the point. Right?
We are where we are, Nick does his thing. I know my shit the way I do. And he knows this thing. It is what it is. There's no, it's very black and white. That's kind of what it is. We all really love fishing, and we get along with other people who love fishing too. Right. That's kind of really what it comes down to.
Awesome. No, like I said, I appreciate you guys having me on and the donation for our fundraiser. hopefully we can do more stuff in the future, whether it's another, me popping on for this, or maybe next time I can get one of the scientists come on and talk about some of the work. Anytime I have the opportunity, the foundation has the opportunity to reach out to other people to talk about what we do and just clear up any misconceptions, really.
I learned a lot.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm always open to talking, as well as anyone else within the foundation, just to get out there, right? Hopefully I'll see maybe some of you guys at some of the tournaments moving forward. Are you guys coming down for the Miami Boat Show? Are you guys doing anything there?
We actually are, yeah. We'll be our debut. So
yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna have a booth. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll be walking around. I'll see you guys down there then.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for everything, Peter. That was awesome.
Like I said, anytime. I appreciate you guys having me on, and hopefully I'll see you guys in person soon.
Yeah, cool. For sure.
Thanks, man. It was awesome.
All right, guys.
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good one. Bye.
Cool.
If anybody has any questions, send them the podcast at billfish.site. Thanks for listening.
Awesome.